It's July 26th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the 2024 Paris Olympics. Team Korea is off to a great start with archer Im Si-hyun setting a world record in the women's ranking round in our Summer Games debut. The Korean women's handballers also beat Germany in the opening match, taking one step closer to bringing home the only available medal in team sports for the country. The National Assembly has once again rejected a special counsel probe bill over a Marine's death. Now a filibuster is set to take place for the next few days, with rival lawmakers clashing over contentious broadcasting bills. The U.S. economy pulled off some unexpectedly strong growth in the second quarter, expanding 2.8%. Businesses are pushing for investment, and consumers are still opening their wallets. The South Korean archers, who have been the source of many gold medals at the Summer Games, got off to a rousing start on Thursday. They came first in the ranking rounds of all 5 events, including a world record performance in the women's individual ranking round. Lee Seung-jae reports.
For many years, South Korea has dominated in archery when it comes to the Summer Games. On Thursday at the Paris Olympics, the South Korean archers got off to a great start, garnering top ranking in all 5 archery events. Over on the men's individual ranking round, South Korea's Kim Woo-jin shot 686 points for the top ranking. However, over on the women's individual event, Im Si-hyun set a world record, scoring 694 out of a possible 720 points. Thursday's world record score shatters the previous record held by Kang Chae-young, who scored 692 points in 2019. Surprisingly, despite being a 3-time Asian Games gold medalist, the Paris Summer Games is Im's first Olympics ever. South Korean archers combined for the highest score during the individual ranking round, giving both the women's and men's team the top ranking, while the top finishes by Kim and Lim gave South Korea another top ranking in the mixed event. The South Korean archers are looking to win 3 or more gold medals in the 5 events. Meanwhile, the South Korean women's handball is off to a great start, beating Germany 23-22 in the opening match. South Korea overcame a 4-goal deficit to narrowly beat the Germans. They will face Slovenia on Sunday, with Norway, Sweden, and Denmark to follow. South Korea has not medaled in women's handball since winning the bronze at the 2008 Beijing Summer Games. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
A working mom with twins in elementary school, Professor Yoo Hae-mi is named the inaugural senior presidential secretary to take a leading role in tackling the country's notoriously low birth rate. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon has the details.
A mother of twin boys is now set to aid President Yoon Suk-yeol with one of the declared national emergencies, the low birth rate. On Thursday, the top office announced that Professor Yoo Hae-mi of Hanyang University's College of Economics and Finance has been chosen for this brand new senior secretary position that President Yoon created to tackle the current demographics crisis.
Yoo Hae-mi has been deeply studying the low birth rate issue in our country, focusing on how marriage and working spouses affect wages, how improving education and changes in the labor market impact economic growth, and how dual-income families divide childcare time.
The changes in population structure significantly impact economic growth, finance, employment, childcare, and welfare. Therefore, we will actively work on communication and preparation with various government departments. By assisting the president, we will do our utmost to help South Korea overcome the national population emergency and leap toward a hopeful future.
The new senior secretary is in her 40s with her boys still in elementary school. Important factors that the top office considered when filling in this new role. A working mother who's still involved in raising her children to relate best with other working moms in the nation.
With the expertise and experience accumulated over the years, along with a fresh perspective, as a senior secretary in their 40s, we expect to develop more fundamental and groundbreaking solutions to overcome the low birth rate problem.
Yu is now set to advise President Yoon with creating a new powerful ministry to respond to the low birth rate. President Yoon announced this earlier this year, saying that the minister will be the Deputy Prime Minister for Social Affairs, something the current Education Minister serves as. In the meantime, there will be two secretaries under the new senior secretary, one for population coordination and one for tackling the low birth rate. Both positions were filled by Korea public officials to assist the new senior secretary. In the meantime, the new senior secretary also said, while new policies will be carried out to raise the birth rate, a significant decline in the working population is inevitable. Another task Yu considers major. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, over in the National Assembly, another filibuster is taking place following one at the beginning of this month. Now, this time, rival parties are engaged in a fierce standoff over contentious bills that call for revisions to the broadcasting laws, seeking to reduce state influence over public broadcasters. Shin-Young reports.
The main opposition Democratic Party on Thursday tabled one of the broadcasting law revision bills, prompting the ruling People Power Party to launch a filibuster in protest. The three bills aimed at reducing state influence over public broadcasters were passed by the opposition-controlled National Assembly last year, but were vetoed by President Yoon Suk-yeol. These include amendments to the Broadcasting Act, the Foundation for Broadcast Culture Act, and the Korea Educational Broadcasting System. The DP is pushing the bills again this time with a revision to the Act on the establishment of the Korea Communications Commission, which requires 4 members instead of the current 2 to pass a resolution.
Everyone has the freedom of the press and publication, with no permits or censorship allowed. This freedom cannot be infringed by anyone.
However, the PPP argues that the bills would increase the presence of progressive figures on the Public Broadcaster Board.
Since 2000, the structure of public broadcasting, including the number of board members and their nomination rights, has remained the same under both conservative and progressive governments. If it was acceptable then, why change it now?
Under the National Assembly Act, a filibuster on each bill can be halted after 24 hours if at least 3/5 of the parliament agree to do so. This means that with the filibuster taking place, the plenary session could last at least 4 days to address the 4 bills. Meanwhile, ahead of the filibuster, the Assembly on Thursday rejected a special prop into the death of a Marine during last year's flood rescue operations. It had been vetoed by President Yoon once again about 2 weeks ago and sent back to the Assembly for a revote. Out of 299 votes cast, 194 were in favor, 104 were against, and 1 lawmaker abstained. But to pass a bill vetoed by the president, 2/3 or more of the lawmakers present must approve it along with the majority attendance. This bill fell short by 6 votes. The proposed bill calls for a special prop into allegations that the presidential office and the defense ministry inappropriately interfered in the investigation of the Marine's death. Right after the session, the opposition parties held a rally to protest and vowed to push for the special prop bill again. Shin-Young, Arirang News.
Speaking to his nation from the Oval Office on Wednesday evening, U.S. President Joe Biden called his exit from the 2024 presidential race a matter of saving democracy and passing the torch to a new generation. VOA correspondent Chris Keskoe joins us live from Washington, D.C. with the details. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Chris, why did Biden feel the need to make this speech and actually address the nation?
Well, Biden wanted the chance to tell the country why he decided to abruptly drop out of the race for president, but he offered few specifics other than to say the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. He did not name his Republican opponent in the presidential race that he just withdrew from by name, but analysts say that Biden's stark warnings throughout his speech all point to one person. Jennifer Mercica, professor of journalism and communication at Texas A&M University, said that Biden talked about polarization, he talked about violence, political violence, and these things all harken back to Donald Trump and his presidency. He talked about the threats facing the nation when he took office in January 2021. And so that was certainly about Donald Trump, but it really wasn't a place for him to give a political speech or a campaign speech. Biden said his job now will be to focus on domestic issues like civil rights and voter freedom, gun safety reforms, the quest to end cancer, and Supreme Court reform. He also cited the various challenges that the U.S. faces overseas with wars raging in Gaza and Ukraine, and China becoming more aggressive and emboldened in the Indo-Pacific. Dami?
Well, but even after stepping aside from the race, it looks like there are calls for Biden to actually step down from his post. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, we're hearing that from vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance and also from House Speaker Mike Johnson. They suggested that if Biden is not fit to run for re-election, he's also not suited to lead the country, which White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said, "I think that's ridiculous, seriously," during an appearance on ABC talk show The View on Tuesday.
Well, polls show that many voters didn't want a rematch of Biden and Trump. Now that Vice President Kamala Harris is the likely Democratic candidate, how are the campaigns changing their strategy?
Well, it's certainly true that the Republicans can no longer focus on age because Harris is 59 years old, much younger than President Trump, former President Trump, who is 77. Now, the analysts say that they'll likely focus on her California background because that state is seen as much more liberal than the rest of the country. And Republican VP candidate J.D. Vance has already tied her to Biden's record as president on the campaign trail. So they're going to try to tie her to issues like Israel and Gaza, her role as finding the root causes of the border crisis at the southern border. They're actually calling her the border czar in some of their attacks against her. But Harris, for her part, says that voters will have a clear choice between her vision and Trump's vision.
Well, you have to tell us who's doing better in recent polls, Trump or Harris or Trump? Well, because earlier polls showed that Harris had a slight lead over Trump.
Yeah, and that really depends on which polls you're looking at. The poll you're talking about where Harris had a slight lead is the latest Ipsos Reuters national poll. Harris leads 44 to 42, but that's within the 3-point margin of error. So they're actually in a statistical dead heat in that national poll. But in some of the battleground states that are going to decide the election, initial polling shows that since Biden's withdrawal, Harris is narrowing Donald Trump's lead in those battleground states. The latest Emerson College in the Hill poll shows that Trump is still leading in Arizona by 5 points, and he's ahead of her by 2 points in Georgia and Pennsylvania, and 1 point in Michigan and in Wisconsin. They're tied. Now, the Brookings Institution says that Harris is really resetting this race because they believe that she'll be competitive in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, which are those battleground states that could decide the election, and also in other swing states like Arizona, which were starting to slip away because of concerns over Biden's age, but she could put those back into contention for Democrats.
And of course,
and also I want to note that.
Yes, please go ahead.
I also want to note that she does better with young voters in some of the latest polls. Only 53% would vote for Biden over Trump, but Kamala Harris, younger voters would vote for her 60% rate, and that's a 20-point lead over Trump. So these younger voters, if they turn out, could be very important in November.
They could be an important variable. Now, we all know the next big decision for Harris is her vice presidential candidate pick. Chris, who are some of the leading contenders so far?
Well, there's a few governors on the list and one senator, but one thing they have in common is they're all from some of those battleground states. The campaign has requested vetting materials from 5 Democratic governors: Roy Cooper of North Carolina, Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, Tim Walz of Minnesota, J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, and one U.S. Senator, Mark Kelly from Arizona. Now, former U.S. Attorney General under President Obama, Eric Holder, and his law firm are in charge of vetting the potential VP candidates. Now, it is most likely that Harris, who is the daughter of a black father and an Indian mother, will choose a white man to be her number 2, according to Joel Goldstein, who studies vice presidents at the St. Louis University School of Law. Geographical balance is also another factor. Harris, who is from California, likely desires someone who can boost the party's chances in those critical swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina. So that's why these are some of the names on the list. And she's probably also seeking ideological balance. A lot of the names and a lot of the faces you're seeing on screen are perceived as more moderate, whereas Harris is going to have to try to outrun the label that Republicans are putting on her that she's a liberal from California.
Definitely. All right, Kurt, so thanks so much for the report today. As always, we appreciate it.
Good to be with you always.
Between April and June this year, the U.S. economy grew at an annual rate of 2.8% after adjusting for seasonal variations and inflation. Now, this surpassed the 2.1% growth forecasted by economists. Our Yoon has the details.
The U.S. economy did better than expected in the second quarter. This was due to strong consumer spending, increased government spending, and a big increase in inventory. A U.S. Commerce Department report on Thursday showed an initial estimate of 2.8% growth at an annual rate from April to June. This is higher than the 2.1% growth rate that economists surveyed by Dow Jones had expected and follows a 1.4% increase in the first quarter of this year. Experts say that the data shows the U.S. economy is growing while inflation is easing. According to the report, one of the key factors that contributed to the increase in GDP is consumer spending. In the second quarter, consumer spending increased by an annualized rate of 2.3%, driven by more spending on goods and services. Government spending also contributed to the economic growth, with federal spending up 3.9%. Meanwhile, private inventory investment grew mainly from wholesale and retail trade. In non-residential fixed investment, spending on equipment and intellectual property went up, but this was partly balanced out by a drop in spending on buildings. On the downside, imports, which pulled down GDP, jumped 6.9%, the biggest increase since the first quarter of 2022. At the same time, exports only rose by 2%. The faster-than-expected growth in the second quarter has led experts to have a more positive outlook for the U.S. economy in the second half of the year. Yoon, Arirang News.
The U.S. is offering a massive reward for information on a North Korean hacker belonging to Andariel, a hacking group under the North's Reconnaissance General Bureau. According to the U.S. State Department on Thursday, a reward of $10 million will be given to anyone who can provide information that will lead to the capture of Lim Jong-hyuk. The FBI says the North Korean national targeted 5 healthcare providers, 4 U.S.-based defense contractors, 2 U.S. Air Force bases, and NASA. RIM and other North Korean hackers would install ransomware on people's computers and extort Bitcoin in exchange for removing the program.
Good morning. I'm Kim Si-young, and this is The World Now. We begin today with the Russian-Chinese joint bomber patrol exercise near the airspace of the U.S. state of Alaska. The exercise included nuclear-capable strategic bombers. However, the U.S.-Canadian Air Defense Organization, NORAD, said that the exercise was not seen as a threat. According to Russia's defense ministry, Russian Tu-95MS strategic missile carriers and Chinese Xi'an H-6 strategic bombers were deployed for patrols over the Chukchi and Bering Seas, as well as the North Pacific in Wednesday's exercise. Russia and China have carried out joint aerial patrols in the past, and the Russian Air Force regularly flies over the Bering Sea. However, Wednesday's joint exercise is the first time that bombers and jets from both countries gathered in the North Pacific area. Moscow and Beijing said that the exercise was not aimed at any third party, while the North American Aerospace Defense Command stated that it was not seen as a threat. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin added that the Sino-Russian exercise was not a surprise and that U.S. troops are at the ready. A Philippines oil tanker capsized and sank in Manila Bay earlier on Thursday local time, spilling some 1.5 million liters of industrial fuel, while one of its 17 crew members was reportedly killed. Surviving crew members stated that the motor tanker Terra Nova left Bataan province en route to the central province of Iloilo when it was met with huge waves and capsized, despite the crew's efforts to steer the ship back to port. Coast Guard spokesperson Armando Balilo said that an aerial survey estimates that the oil spills could be currently contained within a 3.7-kilometer vicinity from where the tanker sank. Balilo said the Philippines Coast Guard is bracing to contain a possible major oil spill, saying that there is a big danger that Manila would be affected and that the effect on the marine environment would not be good. The MT Terra Nova was one of the two ships that sank in the region on Thursday, with the second going down close to Taiwan's southwestern coast. The Western Pacific Ocean region, covering Taiwan and the Philippines, is continuing to experience large amounts of rain and fast winds as Typhoon Gaemi moves through the area. A raging wildfire in western Canada's tourist town of Jasper has caused extensive damage. The fires in Jasper National Park began earlier this week and have already forced some 25,000 people to flee the area by Thursday, while some 400 firefighters from around the world are traveling to Canada to help battle the flames. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said at a press conference that this is the worst nightmare for any community, while reporting that potentially 30% to 50% structural damage has been caused so far. Authorities reported that there are currently 176 wildfires continuing to burn in Alberta, with more than 50 out of control. Around 10 of the out-of-control fires in British Columbia are close to the US border, where dozens of blazes are also burning out of control. The tourist town in the province of Alberta draws over 2 million visitors a year. Sharks off the coast of Brazil's Rio de Janeiro have tested positive for cocaine. Marine biologists at the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation tested 13 specimens of the Brazilian sharp-nosed sharks to find that they had high levels of cocaine in their muscle and liver tissue. The research found that the recreational drugs concentrations were up to 100 times higher than previously reported for other aquatic animals. While a study published in the Science of the Total Environment journal said that the sea predators were consuming the cocaine released from inadequate urban sewage treatment and clandestine refining operations, some suggest the sharks may have mistakenly consumed bricks of cocaine that traffickers had lost at sea. The researchers collected samples over a period of 2 years, starting in 2021, to monitor the marine environment. Previous research shows that the stimulating narcotic has a similar effect on animals as it does on humans.
Good morning. Through the weekend, we'll be seeing heavy rainfall and frequent passing rain due to the indirect effect of Typhoon Gaemi. Those in Jeju need to brace for downpours of up to 400 millimeters. The south coast could see more than 150 millimeters of torrential rain lashing down. Then rain will spread to Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces tonight. In the regions, we'll see heavy passing showers. It's the best to keep an umbrella handy as we could run into sudden downpours like last night. And what about the heat? Heat advisories and warnings remain in place nationwide, and the season's first heat wave warning has been issued here in the capital. And Seoul tops out at 34 degrees Celsius this afternoon, a couple of degrees higher than Thursday, but it felt like it was 35 yesterday, so it's going to feel hotter and muggier today. Daejeon and Daegu should see a high of 34 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Now, sultry weather conditions will last through the end of July, so take care. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next Monday at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.